This week's Torah portion is called Re'eh. It's the fourth Parshat in the book of Deuteronomy, and we're continuing with Moses speaking to the people before they go into the land of Israel, the promised land. Moses is talking to the people, and the first sentence really sums up what it is that I want to talk about. So the first sentence in this week's Torah portion reads, "See, I present before you today a blessing and a curse." The word see, Re'eh, is in the singular, suggesting that we each have our own individual perspective on the world. We each see the world differently. We each have a relationship with God that's unique. Each one of us is an individual that has our own way of interacting with the world and has different lenses, the way we look at the world, etc. When Moses continues with this sentence and he says, "I set before you," the you is in the plural, meaning it's for all of you. It's not just for you, the individual, but it's for everybody, suggesting that yes, we have to we're concerned about ourselves and how we interact in the world and who we are and what we do, and we're also responsible for the collective. We're part of something much bigger than ourselves. We're part of the Jewish people, and we have a mission to accomplish in this world. It reminds me of the story of a man who bought a ticket to go on a boat. And he's sailing on the boat, and there are many people sitting all around him. And while they're in the middle of the ocean, he decides he's going to drill a hole under his seat. In the bottom of the boat, underneath his seat, he starts to drill a hole. And the people come running over to him and say, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I bought the ticket. This is my seat, and I can sit here and I can do what I want. This is my seat. I've paid for it." And he continues to drill the hole under his seat in the boat. His perspective is, this is my seat, I can do what I want. And obviously we're all in the boat and we're all going to sink if he drills a hole there. So similarly, we're all part of a collective. Let's take it the other way. When we do something good, when we do something right, when we do something that brings blessing into the world, that brings goodness into the world, it doesn't just affect us, it affects everybody. It raises all of our boats up. It brings blessing and it brings light and it brings goodness into the whole world, which affects the whole world, not just us. This sentence, "See, I place before you today a blessing and a curse," is written above the gates of Auschwitz. It's written in the Holocaust Museum in Israel. I think Holocaust Museum in DC. I think Elie Wiesel had a role in putting that up there. The idea is that we have free choice. We get to choose. "I place before you," said Moses. You have choices in this world. We are not just floating along, passively going along with whatever's going on around us. We are active participants in our lives, and we should recognize that and grasp that and think about that and understand that we have choices and that we're responsible for the choices that we make. And Moses is saying to the people, choose life, choose blessing, choose good, choose compassion. And interestingly, we read from Rabbi Dessler, he speaks about a point of free will. We have a point of free will in the moral domain. We're not talking about what flavor ice cream you like or what choices you make, like what you're making for dinner. We're talking about moral choices in the moral domain or the religious domain. We have choices to make. Do I choose to, let's say, when I leave a supermarket and I see that I didn't pay for something, do I go back and do I pay for it? Or do I, not pay for it, or do I go back? Like, what do I do there? And if there's an equal voice in my head, I have a voice that's saying, go back, that is equally pitted against the voice that says, just go home, nobody will notice, it's a big corporation, what do they know if I took something for nothing, So we have these two voices, and if they're equally pitted against each other, that is our point of free will. That's where we make choices. That's what do we want? Do we want to line ourselves up with what's good and with what's right with God? Or do we want to, explain things away, maybe go, so who cares? Nobody really knows, doesn't really affect anybody. Go in that direction. And there we have a choice. And, says Rabbi Dessler, the more you choose the good, the more you overcome your negative voice in that battle that you're forging. I learnt for my son that this phrase, Mechayel L'chayel, this phrase of from strength to strength. You should go from strength to strength, uses this word chayel, which is a soldier. We're battling our inner voices, like the voice that says, I'm not going to light my Shabbat candles because I'm being hypocritical, because I won't do something else, or because I'm not really that religious, or because whatever it is that we say to ourselves. But if we fight that battle and we light those Shabbat candles, it says in this week's Torah portion, now you can eat meat. But when you eat meat, make sure you spill out the blood. Don't eat the blood. It will make you bloodthirsty. It will affect you negatively. Don't eat carnivorous animals. That will affect you. Don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. Milk, which is the source of love and nurturance and sustenance for the calf, for the kid. Don't cook the kid in its mother's milk. How insensitive is that for you as a person? So I see that all of this Parsha where it says, I'm giving you free choice to choose between the blessings and the curses. I, Hashem, and the word I is Anochi, which alludes to or points to the Ten Commandments, which points to God giving us all this wealth of Torah knowledge to say, this is how you bring bracha into the world. Line yourself up and you will bring blessing into the world. And you, every single one of you, has the capacity to do that. And it will affect the collective. It's going to bring all the world up. It's going to shine light into the world. If I light my Shabbat candles in my living room and no one is here, it doesn't matter. I'm bringing light into the world. It's affecting the whole world. So this Parsha, I think, is an opportunity for us to pause and think about the constant opportunities, the opportunities we have every single day to grow, to work on ourselves, to create ourselves. And it says, I present before you today, this day, right now, mindfulness. Let's seize the moment. Let's not let that moment pass by. Let's do what's right and what's good now. Let's not put it off. If somebody asks you to help them, if you have a Shiva house to go to, don't wait till next week. Maybe you won't go next week, or maybe you'll get the dates wrong and the Shiva's over. Whatever it is, seize the moment. Try to make it happen now, today, and look back and say, like, here I am. I got to this point. Here I am. I'm who I am because of the people that preceded me, and I'm taking that baton forward. I'm going forward. I'm making choices in the moral domain to choose, hopefully, choose to do good, to choose to bring blessing, to choose to be compassionate. So when God tells us, Moses tells us, that God tells us, don't eat the blood. Don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. Another thing we're taught in this week's Torah portion is to share our wealth. Give tzedakah. Open your hand, but don't just open your hand begrudgingly. Open your hand kindly. Do it with an open heart. Do it because you're redistributing the wealth. It's not yours anyway. You're the one who gets to share it. You're the one who pass it around. So do it with a full heart. Do it with kindness. Do it with compassion. Yes, you're doing a good thing by sharing your wealth, but if you do it with kindness and with an open heart, that's the ideal. That's the way you should be. So in this week's Torah portion, we also learn many times, 7 times, it repeats over and over again, to be basimcha, to be with joy, basimcha. And the letters of the word basimcha are the same letters in the word machshava, which means thought. So our thinking affects our simcha. How we think. There's a story of an old lady, she's a blind lady, and her children bring her to a nursing home, and she's walking into her room, and her daughter says to her, "Oh, Mom, look at the curtains. The curtains are beautiful." And the mother says, "I love it." The mother can't see, and the daughter wants to explain to the mother what's in the room, and she goes, "I love it. I love it. I love it. You don't have to tell me. I have chosen to love it. I have chosen to want to love it, to see the good," right? And in this week's Torah portion, we read see, but we're not seeing. We can't see blessing and curse always. We can't see the good and the bad always. We might have an intuition, but we don't always necessarily see it with our eyes. We might have to feel it. We might have to search for it. We might have to look for it. That's the challenge. The challenge is to seek and see and know the good and choose it today and connect ourselves to God. Simcha, as I mentioned, it's written 7 times in this week's Torah portion, and it's always coupled with the phrase Lifnei Hashem, with God. We're going to be joyous. It's a meaningful joyous that comes from being connected to the divine, connected to God. When we connect to God, we can celebrate B'Simcha. And when we come to the temple, and it talks about it in this week's Torah portion, and we come on the holidays and we bring our offerings, we share them with other people. So our Simcha is not ours alone. Our Simcha is by sharing, by being part of a collective. Our simcha comes from connecting ourselves to God, being part of that transcendent picture, that there's joy in the journey. We are on a journey and we are coming from somewhere and we're going somewhere, and we're part of this much bigger picture, and we get to be a part of that. So as much as, go back to the beginning when we talked about Re'eh is in the singular and I place before you in the plural, we're individuals, and yes, we're in a society where we talk about the I get to do what I want and I get to choose what I want. Well, in the Torah, in the Jewish framework, you are an infinitely valuable individual, but you are also part of a collective. And if I start drilling a hole under my seat, I'm going to take the boat down. And so we are all responsible for each other, and we are all enjoined, as it says in this week's Torah portion, to line ourselves up with God. So when it says in the realm of eating, don't eat the blood. Don't cook a kid in its mother's milk, meaning don't eat meat and milk together. Sensitize yourself. And if you can't find a reason why you should do something, do it because you want to line yourself up with the ratzon, with the desire of the divine. This is what God is telling us, to live our best lives, to bring bracha into the world, to bring blessing into our world. We have to line ourselves up. We have to do the things that turn the taps of blessing on so that they shine down and they open themselves up, and it affects the whole world, not just me and not just my family, but everybody who's in it. So to wrap it up, we have choice, we have free choice. In that moral domain, we can fight between the forces inside of us that say, do it, don't do it. And every time we choose to do good, we choose to line ourselves up with the divine, we choose to put ourselves in the flow, we're strengthening that muscle, that free will muscle to choose good. As it says on the Holocaust Museum, as it says in Auschwitz, choose good. And when you choose good, you'll bring blessing into the world. You might not feel it yourself, you might not see it, but it's coming into the world. We are part of something much bigger than ourselves. And when we choose it, and we choose it over and over and over again, we strengthen that muscle and we move our point of free will up the ladder, so to speak. So after a while, it's not a struggle to only eat animals that are herbivorous. It's not a struggle anymore to eat and to get rid of the blood before we eat the animals. It's not a struggle to avoid eating meat and milk together. We do it over and over again. Then we move our point of free will up the ladder. And sometimes we go back and sometimes we go forward, but we're moving and we're growing. So I think the underlying message of this week's Torah portion is that we have choices that we're responsible for, that we have free will, that we can choose. We can choose how we think, like the old lady in the nursing home that says, I choose to love it. We can choose our actions, what we do. I'm going to not cook a kid in its mother's milk. I'm not going to eat the blood. I'm going to share my wealth. I'm going to give tzedakah, give charity with an open heart. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to do it b'simcha because my mind's involved, because I know I'm connecting to Hashem and God, and I'm connecting to everybody around me, that I'm raising the whole world up. And that's where simcha is. Simcha is connecting to something much bigger than ourselves, to each other and to God. And as we travel through and we strengthen each other, that my blessing for us all is that we become kinder, we become more sensitive to each other, we become more compassionate, we become more connected to the divine.